In the small town of Maplewood, nestled deep in the rolling hills of New England, there stood an old Victorian house known locally as the Witherspoon Estate. It had been vacant for years, its once grand facade now draped in layers of peeling paint and tangled ivy. The locals avoided it, whispering tales of its dark past. The story goes that in the early 1900s, the Witherspoons were a prominent family, wealthy and influential. The estate was the jewel of Maplewood, until one fateful night when the house was engulfed in flames. The blaze consumed the home in a matter of hours, leaving nothing but smoldering ruins and ashes. The townsfolk were shocked when they discovered that the entire family, Richard Witherspoon, his wife Eleanor, and their two children, Henry and Alice, had perished in the inferno. Officially, the cause was deemed an accident, but rumors of foul play swirled around the town. In the years following the tragedy, the Witherspoon estate remained abandoned. Strange occurrences began to plague the area. Locals reported hearing distant cries and the faint sounds of a piano playing on windless nights. The stories varied. Some said they saw shadowy figures moving past the broken windows, while others claimed they could feel a chill of sadness in the air, as if the house itself was mourning its lost occupants. In the mid-1980s, a young couple, Sarah and James Holloway, decided to take on the challenge of restoring the estate. They were drawn to the house's old-world charm and saw potential amidst its decay. However, from the very first night they spent there, things took a turn for the eerie. Sarah was the first to experience the unsettling events. One evening, as she was unpacking boxes in the master bedroom, she found an old, ornate mirror covered in a thick layer of dust. Curious, she cleaned it and placed it on the mantelpiece. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard the unmistakable sound of children's laughter echoing through the halls. When she ventured out to investigate, she found nothing but empty rooms. The real terror began when James started having vivid dreams. He would dream of a young boy and girl, both dressed in old-fashioned clothing, standing at the foot of his bed with eyes full of sadness. They would reach out to him, but as he tried to grasp their hands, they would dissolve into mist. Each morning, James would wake up feeling drained and uneasy, haunted by the feeling that something was desperately trying to communicate with him. One rainy afternoon, while exploring the attic, Sarah discovered an old trunk buried under dusty sheets. Inside were various personal items: a diary, some old photographs, and a locket. The diary, written in a delicate script, detailed the Witherspoon family's final days. Eleanor Witherspoon had written about her fears and her belief that someone was trying to harm her family. The last entry was a frantic plea for help, cut off abruptly mid-sentence. That night, Sarah and James found themselves drawn to the attic, where they decided to hold a séance, hoping to make contact with the spirits that seemed so restless. As they sat in the dim light of candles, they attempted to reach out to the souls of the Witherspoon family. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and a heavy silence fell over them. Then, the candles flickered violently, and the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. The planchette on the Ouija board moved on its own, spelling out a chilling message, "Help us." Before they could react, the attic door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping them inside. The room seemed to close in around them, and the sound of a piano playing a mournful tune filled the space. The ghostly figures of the children appeared once more, their eyes pleading. Sarah and James, terrified and desperate, managed to force the door open and fled from the attic. They left the Witherspoon estate that night, never to return. The house continued to stand, its secrets buried within its walls. To this day, the Witherspoon estate remains abandoned, its dark past whispered about by the townsfolk of Maplewood. Visitors who dare to approach report hearing the faint echoes of children's laughter and the distant strains of a piano, forever haunting the remnants of a once grand home that never truly escaped its tragic fate. Years passed, and the legend of the Witherspoon estate grew more vivid in Maplewood's collective memory. The estate stood as a silent monument to its tragic history, its windows like hollow eyes watching over the town. Occasionally, adventurous souls would try their luck with the place, but each time they reported unsettling experiences, adding to the lore. In the early 2000s, the town saw a resurgence in interest in the old estate. Paranormal enthusiasts, reality TV crews, and amateur ghost hunters all ventured to the estate, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. But every investigation seemed to end in failure or, more often, in harrowing experiences that led people to flee the property. One of the most notable incidents occurred in 2005. A group of college students from a local university, led by a charismatic young paranormal investigator named Mark Dalton, decided to take on the Witherspoon Estate for a high-profile documentary project. Mark and his team were determined to uncover the truth behind the estate's dark reputation. Armed with the latest equipment and a fearless attitude, they set up camp in the house for a week. From the outset, things seemed off. The team's high-tech cameras and recording devices malfunctioned inexplicably, and the temperature inside the house fluctuated wildly, despite the weather outside being mild. At night, they heard footsteps in the empty halls and disembodied whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. One evening, as Mark was reviewing the footage, he noticed something peculiar. In a corner of the screen, faint, translucent shapes seemed to move, almost like fleeting shadows. He and his team decided to investigate this area, which was once the Witherspoon family's library. The library was one of the most intact rooms in the house, with bookshelves lined with dusty volumes and a grand fireplace that still bore the scars of the fire. As they set up their equipment, Mark felt a sudden chill and saw the temperature gauge drop sharply. His team, though experienced, felt an uneasy tension in the air. They began their investigation, conducting EVP, electronic voice phenomena, sessions and using infrared cameras. During one session, a chilling voice came through the recording, saying, "Help us, trapped." Mark and his team pressed on, determined to get answers. They focused their attention on the library's fireplace, where a large, ornate mirror had once hung. The mirror, now shattered and covered in soot, lay abandoned in a corner. The team speculated that the mirror might be a focal point for the restless spirits, given its historical significance. As they worked, one of the team members, Lisa, discovered a hidden compartment behind the fireplace. Inside, she found a small, ornate box. The box was old and intricately carved with patterns that seemed almost alive. Inside was a collection of old, yellowed letters tied together with a ribbon. The letters were from Eleanor Witherspoon, written in a desperate scrawl. They described Eleanor's growing paranoia and fear of someone, perhaps a servant or acquaintance, she believed was plotting against her family. The final letter was particularly disturbing, detailing a sense of being constantly watched and feeling trapped in her own home. As the team read the letters aloud, a sudden gust of wind extinguished their candles, plunging them into darkness. The temperature dropped again, and a low, mournful sound filled the room. The team members huddled together, their breath visible in the frigid air. In the pitch black, they heard a soft, sorrowful piano melody begin to play from somewhere within the house. Mark tried to calm the team, but their fear was palpable. They decided to leave the library and return to their base camp in the central hall. Once there, the team tried to regroup, but the atmosphere in the house had changed. The central hall seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. Shadows danced along the walls, and the temperature fluctuations became extreme. Suddenly, the entire house seemed to come alive with the whispers of the past. The team's equipment went haywire, with cameras and recorders displaying static or showing nothing but darkness. The whispers grew louder, becoming anguished cries for help. The sense of dread was overwhelming, and the team's anxiety reached its peak. In a final attempt to make contact, Mark and his crew used a Ouija board. The planchette moved rapidly, spelling out a final, desperate message: "Free US." Frightened and exhausted, the team decided to abandon the investigation. They packed up their gear and left the Witherspoon Estate, never to return. The footage and recordings they gathered were never fully reviewed or released, and the incident added a new layer of mystery to the estate's legend. The Witherspoon Estate remains a haunting presence in Maplewood, its secrets locked away behind its crumbling walls. Those who venture near still report hearing the distant strains of a piano, the faint cries of children, and the chilling feeling of being watched. The house stands as a testament to a tragic past, its ghostly inhabitants forever trapped in their sorrowful vigil. In the aftermath of the 2005 investigation, the Witherspoon Estate fell into a deeper state of disrepair. The once grand house, now a shell of its former self, stood like a forgotten relic, its history entwined with the restless spirits said to haunt its halls. In the summer of 2010, a new chapter in the estate's story began when a local historian named Evelyn Carter decided to take on the task of researching the Witherspoons' tragic past more thoroughly. Evelyn had heard the ghost stories, but she was driven by a scholarly curiosity about the family and the historical context of their lives and deaths. Armed with historical records, old newspapers, and her own determination, Evelyn delved into the town archives and spoke with longtime residents who remembered the Witherspoon family. She uncovered details that had been lost to time: financial troubles, familial disputes, and a series of strange occurrences leading up to the fire. But the most shocking revelation came from an old journal kept by a townsperson who had been a friend of the Witherspoons. The journal described how Richard Witherspoon had been involved in a secretive and illicit business venture, one that had garnered him both enemies and financial strain. According to the journal, the Witherspoon family had been under constant threat, and Eleanor's paranoia had been well-founded. The journal also hinted that the fire might not have been an accident, but rather an act of arson orchestrated by someone with a vendetta against Richard. With this new information, Evelyn felt compelled to investigate further. She contacted a local archivist to dig deeper into the town's historical records and managed to locate a few surviving documents related to the Witherspoon Estate's financial dealings. One document, a ledger from a former business partner, revealed a series of ominous entries about disputes and threats. Determined to bring closure, Evelyn returned to the Witherspoon Estate one last time, equipped with her research and a new perspective. She carefully examined the property, focusing on the areas mentioned in her findings. As she explored, she discovered a hidden compartment in the basement, obscured by years of debris and neglect. Inside, she found a set of old legal documents and a ledger that seemed to confirm the involvement of an adversary in Richard Witherspoon's downfall. As Evelyn pieced together the story, she realized that the restless spirits were likely tied not only to the tragic death of the Witherspoon family, but also to the betrayal and deception that led to their ruin. Armed with this knowledge, she performed a symbolic act of reconciliation. She conducted a small, respectful ceremony on the estate's grounds, acknowledging the wrongs done and offering a sense of closure to the spirits of the Witherspoons. That night, as Evelyn left the estate for the final time, a sense of calm seemed to settle over the Witherspoon Estate. The whispers in the wind grew fainter, and the haunting piano melody that had once filled the air with sorrow seemed to fade into the distance. It was as if the estate itself was finally at peace, its tragic past acknowledged and honored. Evelyn's research and efforts were recognized by the town, and she was able to share the true story of the Witherspoon family with Maplewood's residents. The estate, though still standing, was now seen through a new lens, a place of historical significance rather than just a haunted relic. The town embraced the estate as part of its heritage, preserving its history and the lessons learned from it. Though the Witherspoon Estate remains an evocative symbol of a bygone era, the spirits that once wandered its halls are no longer bound by their tragic past. The house, though still old and weathered, stands as a testament to the resilience of history and the importance of understanding the past to find peace for the future. Don't forget to subscribe to our new channel by clicking on the link in the description.